listening to What the Freight. I'm Samantha Latshaw. The new headquarters for Roar Logistics is taking shape. Located at 535 Exchange Street, the building will feature cutting-edge technology and a sustainable workspace for its associates. The large-scale move will accommodate about 100 associates, bringing growth to Buffalo's Larkin district. To talk more about the company's new campus-style headquarters is founder and president of Roar Logistics, Bob Rich III. Hey Bob, how's it going?
Hey Sam, how you doing this morning?
I'm awesome. It's a Friday morning, the sun is out, no snow, so for Buffalo, that's awesome.
It's 18 degrees out. I mean, it's funny because Buffalo lulls you into the sense of security. You wake up in the morning and you look outside, it's snowy, or it's sunny, it could be snowy, and you go outside and you get hit in the face with this cold air, and it's like, there's people walking around with t-shirts that say, my face hurts, the weather makes my face hurt, and that pretty much describes Buffalo.
For sure.
And our sports teams.
It could be deceiving. The sun can be out, but it's a lot colder than what it looks.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to talk about this amazing building that you're constructing right now. Just a few days ago, you took me down to the construction site, and I was amazed at how far we've come.
It's really something. It's a testimony to the hard work of all the contractors and the designers and people that have worked to put this together. It's taken a little longer than we wanted, but better late than never. We had anticipated initially being in October, but last spring we had so much rain, the ground was too moist to put the foundation in, and then once we get the foundation in, we had to wait for some very custom panels that we're surrounding the building with that actually make the building appear to look like a pile of ocean containers.
It's definitely moving along, and ocean containers, you brought me to my next question, because that's what I was thinking. The wall, the exterior sides of the wall, it's exactly what it looks like, ocean containers. Where did that innovative design come from?
Well, it's funny because not only is it's sort of funky, but it's also functional. The design is something that a lot of people have looked at and they love, and you read online where people are writing articles and showing pictures, and some people really like it. Some people are like, well, a building looks like a bunch of dumpsters, and it's like, well, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and we're excited. The idea really came from the thought that we wanted to pay homage to Western New York as one of the top 5 shipping hubs back at the turn of the last century. We feel that there's a resurgence going on in Western New York. You're starting to see that Western New York, given our access to Southern Ontario as well as Toronto and New York City and reaching in towards places like Ohio and Pennsylvania, it's really becoming a shipping hub again, and we're very excited about it because we feel that aside from putting up a very unique building, we feel that we're at the center of this resurgence.
Absolutely, and very unique it is, and green. So this building, your new headquarters, will be one of the most energy efficient buildings in all of Buffalo. Talk to me about that.
Well, as Kermit the Frog once put it, it's not easy being green, but it's important given the times that we're in and given the business that we're in. People look at transportation as an industry that's wrought with inefficiency and pollution and carbon issues. But as a company, we really want this building to echo the feel of the business. We do a lot of rail shipping, we do a lot of ocean shipping and truck shipping, and rail shipping, just as an example, is one of the smallest carbon footprints in the environmental realm. So the building has an R factor that exceeds New York State code. We want to make sure that this building is efficient, very energy efficient, as well as very functional for the needs of all of our associates.
Absolutely. Bob, if you can paint the picture for our listeners, it's perfectly situated in such an ideal landscape for your business. You see the train tracks to one view, you have the trucks on the other. Can you just paint the picture?
Sure. Well, when we bought this property, our good friend Senator Chris Jacobs set us up with this property. We had been looking to put something up in Buffalo. We couldn't find any property. He had this ugly duckling, and it's sort of an odd trapezoidal, would you say trapezoidal shape?
Sure.
Yeah, it's close enough. It's like, a rectangle with one angle. I have to ask my son Eric, who's here today. But it is sort of a trapezoidal shaped property. There really wasn't a lot of use for it. It was just this oddball industrial piece of land, and when we got together with Chris, we realized it was really at the gates of Larkinville. It was sandwiched between 2 different railroad lines. So during the day we have CSX runs past there. We also have Amtrak runs past there. And if you're ever in our building at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, The Amtrak train goes flying through there, and it's going to be sort of a wake-up call. After lunch, you're sitting there starting to fall asleep at your desk. Next thing you know, you hear this train whistle blowing as Amtrak goes speeding past our building. So aside from being in the rail and shipping business, it's really cool to have two train tracks. We're actually sort of bordered another block south by a third railroad track. So if we had any derailments or shutdowns, people would have to work overtime because they couldn't get out of the property.
You have 8 operations throughout the U.S. Talk to me about how this construction marks the new stage of growth for Rohr Logistics.
One of the things that we want to do is not only grow in Western New York, but also in the 8 locations where we have offices. That's Buffalo and 7 other locations. Buffalo is really the cornerstone for what we're looking to do in all these other cities. Putting a building up in Buffalo is amazing. It's my intention that in the next 10 years we will be a billion-dollar company and we'll be putting up buildings in all these different communities. We have to give back not only to the city where we were founded, but also to the cities that have afforded us growth over the last 15 years.
Bob, it's a new year, a new decade. What are your predictions for 2020 for both the logistics industry and for Rohr itself?
It's funny, when you look at the industry and you look at the company, we look at the 20s as the roaring 20s. So, it was sort of funny that here we are coming off our 15th anniversary, breaking ground on this property, and then we look at the roaring 20s. And what I tell people is the 20s, it's our decade. Plus it makes for a really cool logo and t-shirt with the roaring 20s. 2020 to us is a year of focus. It's a year of vision. It's like people say that you could see clearly if you've got 2020 vision. Well, if you don't have transparency in your company, then it's very difficult to have a clear vision of where you're going and allow people to be a part of the overall growth. So what we see for the industry is there's a lot of companies coming out here. We're seeing a lot of disruptive companies. We're seeing digital freight. We're seeing companies such as Amazon and Uber coming out here with these electronic systems for, hey, the next level of efficiency is pick up your phone, press a button, use your app to find freight. I think there's a need to disrupt the industry, but I think at the end of the day, it's going to come full circle. I think people will always want to deal with the mid-market size companies such as Rohr because there's a personal aspect to it. I think people say that efficiency is great, but I think that the companies that will truly succeed in this next decade are the ones that can balance the human aspect with exceptional technology and really lead the industry.
Absolutely. People and product. That's one of the
People
most
and product.
important aspect of business.
It's so simple. Transportation, you're going from point A to point B. And I think it's great that there's this technology here, but I think one of the things that the industry's gotten away from is the fact that a true logistician is an artisan. It's somebody who works in a craft. It's almost like a blacksmith. They used to be on every corner, and they're very specialized in what they do. Well, as a logistician, you have to be good at what you do also. I don't think technology will ever replace the human aspect of business because people always want to know that there's somebody at the other end of the phone that cares about what's going on. And that's really been our call at Rohr, is that we want to be a company that works hard and plays hard, and the team that we've put together has something to prove. No matter what technology we're using, whether you're using a pad of paper and a pen, or we've got state-of-the-art technology far beyond anyone else's expectations or wildest dreams, at the end of the day, it's the people that you have at your company that make the difference, and that's what you have to celebrate, is the accomplishments of your people, their expertise in the industry, and what we can do as a team versus what we can program using zeros and ones.
Absolutely. It's definitely about the people, and it's definitely one of the core values for Rohr.
Absolutely. And we've seen that even at Rich Products, our parent corporation. Rich Products is actually celebrating its 75th year in business, and we'll be traveling around the world to see our associates this year. Really excited about that. People often say, well, Rich Products is your parent corporation, $4 billion company. It must be nice. Rohr must be happy hauling all that freight for Rich's. Rich's is probably less than 10% of our business. We've got a very standalone, very autonomous company, but we're very proud of our lineage. As a shareholder at Rich Products, I'm very proud of the over 11,000 associates we have globally. but extremely proud of the 140 associates we have at Roar that come in every day and take the initiative to do what they have to do to get the job done. You don't have to point your finger at people to get the job done, as long as you can empower them and get them excited about the task at hand and the vision for the company's future.
And as we head into 2020, global shippers using ocean transportation can expect some new challenges and opportunities. Here to talk about ocean freight shipping and how trends could impact shipping capacity is Sean Daly, Director of International Services for Roar Logistics. Sean, welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning, Sean. How's it going?
Good. How about yourself?
So 2020, oh my gosh, we are kicking off to a fast forward year. A lot has happened in the first few weeks of the year, including the new IMO 2020 regulation, which took effect on the 1st. The mandate reduces the maximum amount of sulfur content in fuel from 3.5 to just 0.5%. How will this move affect ship capacity and freight rates?
Yeah, so with the new IMO regulation in effect, we are seeing freight rates impacted at the fuel level. So bunker adjustment and fuel surcharges have been on the rise for the last 2 months, not only to offset the increased costs that vessel operators have seen when retrofitting and the increased costs at the fuel level, but also the issue isn't necessarily the drop in the sulfur level as much as it is availability to fuel. And so what we're seeing is that vessel operators are having to call ports they wouldn't normally within their normal operating schedule in order to refuel before they set back out into the ocean. So that's been a big impact across the board, and we've also experienced some adjustments as far as bunker is concerned on export. For the last few years, we've been pretty happy with a $0 export bunker, and just in December of 2019, that was increased up to $50. So not a huge impact per container, but something that exporters need to take into consideration as they forecast for 2020.
You're right. And there are some alternatives to the new regulation. Carriers, like you mentioned earlier, you can have the option of continuing to use the higher sulfur fuel while installing scrubbers to convert the
Absolutely, yes.
the sulfur emissions, and then also the alternative fuels like natural gas.
Yep, absolutely. So there's been a lot of alternatives that have been proposed, but three basic breakdowns. Carriers could continue to use the high sulfur fuel, in which case they would have to retrofit their current ships with scrubbers that could bring it down to 0.5 before recycling, but also obviously the low sulfur alternative, as well as methanol and natural gas. However, the biggest impact has been with solar power. We've seen a lot of the carriers move towards solar power with their new builds as opposed to the alternative fuel sources.
I mean, obviously with these financial impacts on us or on anyone as an ocean forwarder, how do you communicate this to your customers? There's a lot of data, there's a lot of stuff here. How does somebody go about simplifying and communicating this to the customers in a way that they understand? It's not a lot of mumbo jumbo, but to explain and get them to accept some of the cost impacts and potential service impacts.
Yeah, I think the best way that we've approached it has been kind of the correlation between fuel surcharges at a domestic level and understanding that a slight shift in the price that is seen at the pump can impact what they're paying with their service providers to move their freight domestically. And so now people are seeing that the same exact thing can happen on the ocean with their sea freight.
Let's talk about the environment here, guys. Sulfur oxide emissions are known to be harmful to human health, causing respiratory symptoms such as lung disease. In the atmosphere, it can lead to acid rain, which can harm crops, forests, and aquatic species. Now, Roar is an industry that thinks about the environment and the people. Talk to me about how you guys are thinking about this new move.
It's important to consider the environment no matter what you're doing and every day. It's a basic premise of social responsibility. For us, when we look at ocean shipping and rail shipping versus standard truck shipping or even barge shipping, With an ocean vessel, you're able to move more containers at one time than you can using a train, and way more containers than you can using, 400 or 500, 600 trucks to pull each of those individual containers. So critical to what we do and being part of the U.S. government's SmartWay program, which is basically it's a watchdog. It's a voluntary program where we get involved and we share our shipping data with the U.S. government to try and determine how we can better increase our carbon footprint. We look at the amount of rail shipping and the amount of ocean shipping as key to diminishing our carbon footprint and being more of a socially responsible shipper.
So January, it's a huge month in China.
Absolutely.
Includes the Chinese holiday breaks this month, the Chinese New Year, Golden Week. It also has the boat festival that goes underway during this celebration. How is that going to impact supply chain?
Throughout January and February, China observes several different holidays, although their biggest being national holiday, the Spring Festival and the boat festivals. And so we're gonna basically see the entire export industry shut down during January 26th through the 30th, and the hard part there is it's going to extend a little before and a little after. Obviously, it's going to slow down heading into the holiday, just as we kind of experience here towards the end of December. However, a lot of the exporters will also bring their plants down for maintenance during this time period. So a little bit of a slower start when we come back into February, and the beginning of February also sees a few holidays. So there's some special working days where people are brought in to do kind of like a spring cleaning, which will throw off some of the export schedules. And at the same time, we'll also be seeing the Lantern Festival in the second week in February. So there will be a little bit of turmoil as far as the terminals are concerned there in getting freight out efficiently.
So Sean, it sounds like it's kind of a goal to get your product out before the January 26th.
Absolutely, yes. The big push is to make sure that you've got space dedicated to your customers on the vessels that are departing immediately before the holiday hits, and then there's a big rush to try and find space as soon as manufacturing picks back up.
And with all this action going on, we have President Trump, who just signed phase 1 of the trade deal with China in a push to stop further economic conflict. So what now?
Well, there's a lot to unpack in phase 1. However, I don't believe we're going to see the immediate or see these impacts immediately. I do believe we're probably 6 months away from experiencing any of that. I do foresee our imports ticking up over the next probably 3 to 6 months, simply because the September 1 list of 301 tariffs will have its rate slashed in half, down to 7.5% as opposed to 15%. And that was probably the biggest takeaway, outside of the fact that the rest of the 301 tariffs will maintain at least through the 2020 election cycle here in the U.S. So definitely some good takeaways, such as about $40-50 billion in increased exports out of the United States, primarily within the agricultural and manufacturing communities.
Hey, Sean, with these Trump tariffs, as they refer to them, what are you seeing customers do to get around that? I know we've talked in the past as we've traveled internationally. What are customers doing to get freight in from Asia if China's not a desirable shipping point or is an unattainable shipping point because of the tariffs? What are customers doing to get around that?
We've recognized a big shift, primarily in just moving manufacturing to some of the other Far East countries, specifically Malaysia, South Korea, Vietnam, Thailand come to mind as the biggest destinations for the majority of our partners. However, we've also noticed that there's been an uptick in regulatory consulting, specifically to understand whether or not there are alternative strategies to reducing duty liability upon import for goods that are coming from China. And China has a really good base of free and foreign trade zones. So there are alternative measures that can be put in place within supply chain to ensure that you are mitigating your liability, but not impacting where your product is being manufactured too much. As that's the biggest concern, right, is that the country that you're moving your manufacturing to may not have the infrastructure required to support the movement of your goods, both domestically to get it to port. Maybe they don't have the same frequency of sailings out of your local port, so it's a little harder to catch a vessel. So there are some other considerations when you're moving manufacturing to another country. So if they can keep it in China, our customers want to, but then you need to find a strategy to mitigate liability with duties and taxes upon import.
I'm really interested in this shift. These countries, Vietnam, Malaysia, India, Thailand, so on, each one of them have like a focus. Some focus on the manufacturing of paper and so on in this shift. Talk to me about that.
Just like within any manufacturing environment, you're going to find your niche and you're going to do something well. And sometimes that could be related to raw material that you have access to. Other times it's market demand. And so one of the things that we've definitely seen is there's a separation on who's doing what. In Vietnam with Thailand, the huge and aquatic species export, a lot of fish product coming from those two countries. Whereas countries like Malaysia have really tried to pick themselves up in material manufacturing. They want to become the assembly line as China did for the United States. And so there's been a strong push on their end to bring in manufacturing, raw manufacturing into the country and try and bolster up their assembly line production.
Now, this could be interesting. Japan and the U.S. have a brand new trade deal. What should we expect?
The biggest focus as Japan and the U.S. sat down at the negotiation table was the auto industry. And interestingly enough, while that did gain a lot of traction under the proposed Trans-Pacific Partnership, which President Trump pulled out of his first week in office back in 2017, the agreement that did come to fruition really did not focus on any of those industries that the TPP did. So what we've seen specifically with Japan is that American agricultural products are going to be on the rise as far as imports are concerned. And Japan has offered to lower tariffs on a host of products such as cheese, wine, pork, and beef. And then in return, the U.S. will see lower tariffs on industrial goods. But we won't be seeing much done in the auto or as it related to things like semiconductor manufacturing. Those were pretty much left off the table.
The Senate just approved the new U.S.-MCA trade deal. I know it's a little bit premature. It just happened, but I want to hear your thoughts on that.
So this is probably the biggest shift that we've seen from the administration, not because we didn't know it was coming. It had been touted during the election cycle leading up to President Trump taking office. So we had anticipated that there would be a renegotiation here, but we had been hearing that for a very long time. So it was welcome change. And I think it's probably the only bipartisan agreement to come out of Washington in a very long time. So with the USMCA, we do foresee a bunch of changes to the U.S. ag community, but at the same time, the biggest kind of piece for the United States was how our services, so industrial services, such as the installation of manufacturing machinery and assembly lines and things of that nature, were going to be impacted. And Canada did make some pretty good concessions there. So we're really excited to see U.S. exports rise going into Canada. Now we can support those exports, our raw material and products that we're selling into Canada from the United States. So I think that's going to be big as well. We're going to see a reduction in tariffs with Canada, specifically to U.S. dairy products, including milk, but primarily baby formula. That was a really big topic. And that is something that we won in the deal. So we're excited to see how that's going to impact the northern border here between us and Canada. And then on the southern border, there's always been a real strong push to kind of have a cooperative manufacturing process with Mexico. A lot of products are started in Mexico and then brought in kind of half assembled, or with a little bit more to go. And the issue there is that if they were brought in with maybe only 10% left to construct, there wasn't an opportunity for U.S. workers to have a hand in finishing that product. At the end of the day, it was more or less painting and things like that was required in order to get those products on the shelf. And so now what we've seen is that there's been some pushback from the U.S. side, and we'll start to see products being brought in more in a more raw state, allowing our U.S. workers to do the actual completion and bring those products to the shelves. So that's really exciting, as it's going to increase demand for our services as well from a regulatory standpoint with customs brokerage.
Definitely exciting. A lot of changes happening, and the year is just getting started, including the new tariff schedule for 2020. Why is this important?
Always important for us to know about amendments that are happening to the harmonized tariff schedule throughout the world. But biggest impacts that we've seen this year, kind of twofold. One, the tariff schedule itself went through a major update, which is going to realign certain products in different sections and chapters. But at the same time, we're also seeing that international commercial terms are being updated as well. And so these two things go hand in hand, where responsibility shifts from the seller to the buyer, and where products are aligned right within the tariff are going to impact your liability to U.S. Customs and Department of Treasury. So it's the biggest takeaway from this is to make sure that your product still is classified where it used to be, regardless of what section or chapter it fell in before, as well as we need to be aware of whether or not the liability changed. A lot of the duty rates have been updated, even if there's small shifts, 0.5% in either direction. It's going to impact supply chain. It's going to impact your overall payable to U.S. Customs, which it's a ripple effect, right? And then people are dealing with underwritten bonds, there's sureties that they're already in place, and they have $50,000 coverage with U.S. Customs importations, but now all of a sudden that's no longer acceptable, right? Customs is sending out demand letters telling them they need $70,000, $80,000, and $100,000 coverage. So there's other impacts that these changes are going to have. People don't necessarily take into consideration, right? They're primarily worried about their bill that they're going to receive from the government, and they leave out these measures. But it's really important to understand that in order to mitigate penalty action, we really forecast what the liability is going to be throughout 2020, and we support that forecast properly.
It seems like we've covered a lot of grounds today, talking about all the different regulations and challenges for the industry and the opportunities for the industry. But at the end of the day, for the customer, for somebody listening to this podcast, if you're shipping or you're a receiver, what is the forecast? What do you think is going to happen here? You put all this in a big pot and you throw it out there, and you come down at the end of the day to try and figure out, where are we going as an international freight forwarder? Where is the forecast? What is the forecast looking like for the ocean industry in general over the next decade?
I think there's two main points I'd like to make. And the first is that for somebody who's approaching this question while trying to manage or maintain their current supply chain efforts, I think the biggest takeaway from everything that's going on in the industry right now is that, yes, there's going to be a cost increase that is felt across the board with container traffic and ocean freight. But more than that, we need to be aware of what some of the impacts are across the board, regardless of what steamship line you're using, as it relates to the mitigation of the new IMO regulations, as well as things like we're still feeling the impact of Hanjin filing for bankruptcy and going out of business a few years ago, and that is slow steaming, commonly referred to as slow steaming with the steamship lines, where they slow their vessels down. Transit time that was originally 12, 15-ish days from Far East to the West Coast sometimes 17, depending on what ports they called first and last, could be bumped up to 20 to 25 days. And that's going to have a major impact on supply chains throughout the United States. It's going to take longer to get product into your manufacturing facilities. It's going to take longer to reposition containers from east to west because they're going to be sitting in the terminal a few extra days. They're going to be on the water an extra week. And so, the kind of the container levels and equipment levels that you do see throughout, the major markets in the United States are going to be in flux when these ships start slowing themselves down. And that's the biggest concern that we have as not many people like changes to their transit time and cost at the same time, right? You don't want to pay more for slower movement, and so that's most likely what we're going to see come June-ish. Is slower moving vessels and a higher cost to go alongside with it. And then, aside from that and more from the service provider standpoint, I'd say the biggest thing that we're looking at are contracts and what it is that we're able to get out of the steamship lines. And I'm sure BCOs, beneficial cargo owners, I'm sure they're going to feel this as well. But steamship lines are pushing back on the long-term contract rates. They really want to start offering 3-month rates, 3-month contracts, and that's going to impact service levels across the board.
Why do you see them doing that, Sean? I mean, is this fear on their behalf?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, they're afraid they're going to tie themselves into rates for far too long. They're not going to be able to sustain with the new IMO regulations, and that fuel's going to push them out of being profitable.
Do you think we're in a buyer's market as far as the outlook for now? I mean, it sounds like these short-term tariffs say, we no longer have the power to dictate a 12-month tariff. Do you think that the shipper is at an advantage right now or a disadvantage with the steamship lines?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a good position for the shipper to be in right now. I think they're well poised to reap the benefit of a renegotiation with the steamship lines. Whereas, from an NVO's perspective, we're kind of at a disadvantage in that we can't go and offer the same contract terms and lengths that the steamship lines can do directly.
That's excellent. And a lot of good points there with what's going on right now in the industry. It seems that even on the domestic side, there's a lot of opportunity for shippers to reap the benefits of sort of a changing environment and a changing scenario overall. So it sounds like very much what we're seeing on the domestic side, we're also seeing on the international side. And right now, a savvy shipper stands to have a lot of efficiencies and do better in a market as compared to the last couple of years where we saw shortages of equipment and higher rates.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely been some leveling off there. And I do believe that the shippers are really excited to sit back down at the table and they've started to experience some of the savings that can be had. But more so, I think I've started to see much more focus on actual efficiencies being driven, right? I think we all need to be effective. It's whether or not we could be efficient at the same time. And so that's been the biggest driver, right? EDI, looking for cost savings, but doing so, based on an EDI connection. And that's great for long-term partnership. And I know steamship lines are really happy to see that, especially with the onset of blockchain and other technologies that are coming into the industry.
Are you seeing disruptive technologies on the international side as compared to like what we see on the domestic side? The digital freight, the companies coming in here really disrupting the industry. What are you seeing on the international side for that?
The digital freight forwarder is a wonderful concept. I don't know that I completely wrap my head around it yet, but the idea that we could have the kayak or the price line for international freight movements, commercial freight, I think is a little far-fetched, but there's people trying it, and there's been some success. I kind of believe that you're not going to be able to remove the human element. There's just way too much going on from a regulatory standpoint, that you're required to interpret and decipher exactly what the federal government's asking you to do on an import or an export transaction. Technology is just not there yet. Maybe AI down the road can take our jobs from us, but at this point in time, we're not there. So I don't see them disrupting the market too much. I would say the biggest kind of piece of technology that has been put in play has been pricing tools. And those are very welcomed, not only from a service provider side, but from the buyer side. Our customers want to be able to obtain their rates quicker and easier. And if they don't have to email and wait for a day to get that rate sent back to them, if there's a tool that they can jump to and get their rates immediately, their customers are happy, and in turn, they're happy, and therefore we're happy. So that's been the biggest kind of technological advancement that we've seen. And I think everybody's kind of holding their breath for blockchain as to whether or not that'll have a true impact. But we're probably a few years away from that still.
Where can our listeners reach out to you if they have questions?
Yeah, sure. So www.roarlogistics.com. Great place to start. It's going to have all of our primary contact information. And I reside here in the Buffalo office, so please feel free to reach out to us at any time.
Great leaders tend to share great advice and words of wisdom. In this episode's Leaders Insight with Bob Rich III, we're talking about creating a culture of empowerment. Bob, how do you transform talent into performance?
People talk a lot about empowerment as being important in business, as in everyday life. I think when you put together a team that's talented, you've got a strong team of individuals that's talented. But when you empower people and give them ownership of the process, you create leadership and you create leaders. You create people mindset such that there's a desire to succeed, and because there's an ownership to the process. If you own a process and you're working in an environment that encourages you to make decisions and not be afraid of failing, then you truly take some chances. You take some risks, and it's sort of like I refer to it as body English. Creating that empowerment and creating that performance. When you're golfing, if anyone who's ever golfed out there, I'm sure we got a lot of golfers out there. When you're standing on the green, you get that 30-foot putt, and you hit the putt, and you watch the ball going, and you sort of feel your body moving, like turn to the right, turn to the left. You're moving with the ball. There's sort of that body English. It's difficult to describe, but it's just giving people these subtle opportunities and little pushes and directions to try and draw out the leadership that everybody naturally has within them. It's not easy, but as a leader, you find that it's easier to create a positive, working, performing team if you give them ownership of the process. You step back from it, you know what you know, and you know enough to be dangerous, but you let your team be the leaders and run the company.
And part of that learning process is sometimes to know that there might be some mistakes along the way. How do you work through that?
I think the companies that fail are the ones that penalize for mistakes instead of nurturing beyond the mistake and looking at it as a learning experience to say, well, if we make these mistakes, it's like heading down a path that leads to nowhere or goes off a cliff. You don't want to go off the cliff. You see it coming, so next time when that opportunity for that mistake or that error comes up, you don't do it again. Good leaders have an ability to find the positives in a negative situation, look beyond the negatives, and focus on those positives to say that, hey, this bad happened or this challenge was here, but the good of it is this came out of it. So you really need to, as a leader, not focus in on the negatives. Don't rub people's nose in it, but look at those negatives as learning experiences and opportunities to better perform in the future.
Bob, describe for me a culture that would succeed.
A positive culture is one based upon positivity. A negative culture is one based upon keeping things very close to the vest, of not sharing information. And the cultures that succeed in business today are the ones where the leaders are cheerleaders more than they are directors. People always talk about a maestro leading the orchestra. That's a bit of what we do as leaders, but I think at the end of the day, I would rather be the guy sitting in the audience clapping for that ultimate performance that this team puts together and be the cheerleader to drive them on to greater successes. To me, I think a culture that would succeed is one that is open, is transparent, is nurturing, and is high energy. I think all those things go together because I think if you've got those first few things, if you add the energy and you add enthusiasm, then you're encouraging people to push for greater things. I think you need to reward people, and I think a lot of those rewards are intrinsic, such as feeling good and self-esteem and positivity. And there's some extrinsics. I mean, who's not motivated by the dollar? It's nice to have a couple extra bucks in your pocket. But I think at the end of the day, if you can find a balance between rewarding with intrinsic and extrinsic rewards, you'll find a way to create a high-performing team. Oh, and by the way, just in case anyone's hearing throughout the episode here, what sounds like dog tags is speaking of high-performance teams, Lola is here today. We have Lola, the Shih Tzu poodle, is in the office. We try to do things a little bit different. So, here in the office, sometimes we'll have dogs wandering around. Just something to get people, to realize that, hey, we don't take it too seriously. And I think back to your question of, what makes a company successful. I think if you don't take it too seriously, you have to take it seriously, but if you don't take yourself too seriously and you just focus on the task at hand, and you get excited about what you're doing and you share with people and you cheerlead each other on, then you'll have a high-performing team that will outperform anybody in your industry.
Definitely. Lola definitely makes the environment even more fun here.
Lola's the best. And she literally will go around to the office and she will say hi. I swear. She will go and say hi to everybody in the office. She'll walk around. Then she'll come back out front and she'll lie down by Megan, our assistant, by her desk. And Megan will give her a couple treats and she'll just hang out there for the rest of the morning. And then when she feels like getting up, if she sees somebody who needs a little boost, she senses it. So, I mean, I'm thinking she's our service dog, our emotional support dog here.
Right, and you definitely take this into perspective, the work hard, play hard mentality, because the new construction, the new building, the new headquarters, you're going to have some fun things to do in there for the associates.
Well, we're going to be doing some really cool stuff. Sean, we've been talking a lot about the gym.
Oh yeah,
that's
gym, the arcade.
Yeah, the arcade. We're gonna have probably a shuffleboard game and bubble hockey. We're actually looking to get bubble hockey made with home and away Roar jerseys on the players.
Be awesome.
Yeah. It's gonna be great.
That's gonna be cool.
We're excited. And it's funny because when we travel around the world, Sean and I do a lot of travel for the international. We see a lot of different cultures, and you see a lot of companies. Such when we go over to Asia, you go into a room and there'll be 300 people crowded into a room and they're just working all day. And then when they leave for lunch or they leave at the end of the day, there's nothing exciting about what they do other than, the work that they're doing. For us, when we go in and we see a place, I can't remember where we were. Were you with me in Vietnam when we went to, we were at a facility in Vietnam and they are huge into ping pong. And I had to play ping pong and I got crushed. And then they play, what is it? Is it, what's pool? Is it 3-ball or 4-ball pool?
Man.
Yeah. I played, we were in Vietnam and I was playing, I think it was 4-ball against one of the associates at Rich's. And she cleaned my clock 3 games straight. I put $1 up on the table. That was all I was going to do. After she beat me, she sort of let me think I was going to win the first game, then she cleaned my clock. So, yeah. I've got a picture somewhere. We'll post it to and by the way, we're going to post pictures here. Until we get some video and stuff up, we're going to post some pictures of us doing the podcast because I think it's fun for people to see that, you're human, you're not just sitting there at a desk, blah, 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 blah. We're having fun with this. And, but our culture at the new building, like I said, we're going to have a gym. We've got the sort of the arcade, the break room with the televisions and stuff. And we'll have music. Music is very important to have music in the workplace. A lot of people don't like it, but I think that music calms the savage beast, as Bugs Bunny used to say.
Definitely check out our Facebook page because we'll be showing some sneak peeks of the construction underway.
Absolutely. We're going to do a time lapse of the new building, which is great. It's really exciting. I guess for us, with the new building and the new decade coming here, we really look at this as being our decade. Last year was our 15th anniversary. There's a lot of pomp and circumstance, but this new building is really a part of the psyche of the team here in Western New York, and I think to some extent to the associates around the country, the 7 other locations. I want to do this in every location that we are. I love, building openings or breaking ground. It's exciting. So for us to be able to do this in Western New York, our hometown, where we've always been, where we're always going to be based in headquarters, this is our town. So for us to do this, it's truly, we're leaving our mark on the community, and we want it to be a positive one. We want to create a place where people want to come to work, and where people want to come and grow and thrive as individuals, not just because they want to work at this company's got a gym and an arcade, but they want to come and work here in a place where their efforts are valued, and we focus on the associate, not just the bottom line of our company, but we support their efforts for each other as well as the community efforts to give back to causes that matter to them the most.
You're a Buffalo-bound company, and you're staying Buffalo.
Oh, we have to, and it's one of those things that as we look at the next few generations coming along here, we've got the next group of leaders at this company, working for us throughout the company, and we've got a team that is driven. We've got people that look at this as a career opportunity. We can always do better. We're always striving to do better at what we're doing here, but we're going to be the premier employer in Western New York and beyond, and we're going to leave a legacy here for our associates, as well as generations of family to come, that this was a company that cared about the associates and their causes in the communities that we work in.
And I think there's a big connection there to be made between giving the associates ownership of their day-to-day tasks and the new build, right? I think a lot of us are really excited to see ROAR in big letters on the side of a building that we can call home. It's been in the news, we see it on social media. So it's another step in giving a little bit of ownership, right? Now we've got our own building, it's ours. We feel that sense of pride walking into it, and we're all really excited for that.
It's really a building that was built by the associates. It's the efforts here at the company by everybody to give back in the hard work of the team, to say that they're walking in the door, that they played a part in it. Every associate in Western New York signed the final piece of steel that went into that building, and so their name is written in the building, and it's more than just a girder with everybody's name on it. It is a commitment to our team, it's a commitment to our community, and it's a commitment to Western New York and everyone in general.
On our next episode, we're going to be talking about carrier relationships. Give us a little tease.
I think one of the most important aspects of our business is not only how we treat each other and how we treat our customers, but how we interact with our vendors and our carriers, and the relationships we build with the service providers who are the ones that are ultimately delivering the service that we put our name and our stamp on. I'd like to give a shout out to our audio engineer, my son Eric, who actually came in here. He's a Mac guy and was working to help out today. He's got the day off from school, and maybe one of these days we'll teach him how to be a logistician, and he'll spend a little more time here with us.
Stay up to date on industry trends. What the Freight is the best way for logistics professionals who are on the move to get the latest news in supply chain management. Catch us on Transistor.fm, Spotify, Facebook, and YouTube whenever you want, all the time, 24/7. For more information, head to our website at roarlogistics.com. Bye, guys.
See you.
Bye.